This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome everybody to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Joining me as always, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Boy, we got a lot to get to. This week, it's all about Tarik Skubal. Everybody's talking about one of the Detroit Tigers all-star selections alongside Riley Green. People are talking about maybe potentially shipping him off to Baltimore. Could Los Angeles put together a massive package? The Dodgers are known to be aggressive. Was Tarik Skubal snubbed from being an all-star starter? And then in the second half of the podcast, we're inching ever so close. 6 days away from the media attending Detroit Lions training camp. It's going to be very interesting. We'll check in with key storylines, what Adam is interested in, and obviously, checking in with the Detroit Lions as they have such high expectations. Is there a potential for a setback? Would you be okay if the Lions basically had a similar season that they did in 2023? Because it's real interesting in regards to probably this year, the calendar year, the last 12 months, I did not check in with any of the All-Star games. Not the NBA, not the Pro Bowl, not the NHL. And this morning, on Wednesday, I woke up and I was like, wait a minute, wasn't there a baseball all-star game going on? I did not check into it at all. Did not see any highlights, didn't see anybody tweet about it. I was just like, wait a minute. And then I checked in the American League One, and that's fine. Tarik Skubal got his appearance, 10 pitches in the second inning. He did what he needed to do. It looked like, by all accounts, Riley Green handled business. But for me, I just was not intrigued. I've kind of enjoyed the lull that has been the slowest week on record in regards to the sports world. So I look at it and I say, you know what? I've turned my attention to other things that are, world news and other type stuff. But it was, something where I did take offense when you heard that Tarik Skubal was not named the all-star starter. And it kind of had the feel of, wait a minute, when you just, the great sports fans of Detroit put together a list of the stats back-to-back, and you go, wait a minute, Tarik Skubal had much, much better stats than anybody in the American League. And for him not to earn the start, I thought would be considered a snub, because it's just a situation in which his numbers dictated that he was the best pitcher in the American League in the first, half of the 2024 season. And do you take offense to it? And what did you make of the All-Star game? Did you check into it at all? Good win for the American League, but I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, you know what? It was an event that just passed, and I think it's embarrassing that the biggest news coming out of the All-Star game was the drunk Michigan gal that botched the national anthem.
Yeah, that was the biggest story. And I'll be honest with you, I had no idea who she even was. I had to ask the wife, and I was like, do you know who she is? And she was like, yeah. She's like, I kind of like some of her stuff. And then we had this conversation, if she's going to really go to rehab or if she just had like a bad moment and she's going to use rehab as the guise to kind of get out of this and kind of get past it. But that's neither here nor there. Look, I wasn't offended that Tarik Skubal wasn't named the AL starter for the All-Star game. That didn't offend me. But it did have me scratching my head, because if you look at the stats and you line them up, he was way better than Corbin Burns this first half of the season. If you look at who's most important to their team, Tarik Skubal is arguably the most important person in the MLB right now to the Detroit Tigers. So when you start to kind of break it down and you look at it that way, it was definitely a head scratcher. I don't think this was the most egregious thing that's ever happened to a player. But if I'm Tarik Skubal, I'm pissed. If I'm a Tigers fan, I'm a little bit upset by this. And I just don't understand how this happened or why this happened. And when you look at the performance from the All-Star game itself, he was the most efficient starter in this game. He was the most efficient pitcher that starts for either the NL or the AL. Now you can go through and you can find some relief pitchers that have a little bit better stat line than him because they have a couple more strikes. But this guy in one inning basically threw 10 pitches and he basically mowed everybody down 1, 2, 3, got out of it. And 70% of those 10 pitches were strikes. So do the math. 7 out of the 10 were strikes. That's pretty impressive. This guy deserved to start this game. I don't think this is the most egregious thing that's ever happened to Detroit fans or in Detroit sports, but I do think it's worth talking about because, again, this guy is so important, so vitally important to this team. There's a reason why during the game they're mentioning possible trades to teams like Baltimore, maybe the Dodgers, possibly the Yankees are involved. This is going to be the hottest commodity on the trade market if the Tigers are willing to move him. So to me, he should have been the guy who was named the ace of the AL side in the All-Star game. To me, again, like I said, it's just a little bit head scratching that he ended up going second. And again, not a huge deal. The guy really showed his stuff and he looked really, really good in the All-Star game, but I don't know how you can justify Corbin Burnes starting over Tarik Skubal in this game, especially after you lay out all the criteria and you go through the stat lines. Tarik Skubal really and truly should have started this. But I think the big thing that's coming out of this is that conversation about what the Tigers could possibly get from the Orioles in exchange for Tarik Skubal. The Orioles were a team that you and I talked about, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when we talked about him possibly being on the trade market. The Orioles have a incredibly deep farm system, a ton of guys that could come in and immediately better this team. What are your thoughts of the Orioles being highlighted and discussed this early on as the front runner to get Tarik Skubal? And would you be okay if the Tigers did trade Tarik Skubal for, I'm hearing packages that are getting bantied about where it's their number 1 overall prospect, their number 3 overall prospect, and somebody else in their top 10 prospect list. And look, 2 of those 3 guys would immediately come over and start for you. So what are your thoughts about possibly giving up the best pitcher in all of baseball right now for 3 young guys, 2 of them who would come in and immediately start for you?
Yeah, no doubt. Sports Illustrated's Tom Verducci, he put it out there that the talk is from the people that talk to him, and he's a respected Major League Baseball reporter, that the Dodgers and Orioles are seriously considering putting together big-time packages that are going to involve high-level prospects. And that's good because clearly it's been established that the Tigers are not just going to give away Tarik Skubal. So if you get Holiday, that's a guy that you can plug in at third base, and now you have you have a guy that clearly can be somebody of value. There's also talk of a high-level shortstop with the Orioles that is a high-level prospect. And if you can get 2 infielders, you also have to recognize, I think what people kind of are getting concerned about is that, oh my goodness, you're going to lose Tarik Skubal. Well, you have Chris Fetter, who kind of has been, for the last couple of years, taking some reclamation projects that the organization's given him, like a Michael Lorenzen, like a Jack Flaherty, like pitchers that kind of have been cast aside that have come in and done some things. So I think you should trust that maybe you have pitching talent in your organization that can develop, or you go sign someone that's close, maybe not an ace, but somebody that can come in and eat some innings. So I'm not terribly upset with the talk. I think that's what you got to do. And it's unfortunate that, and we've talked about it before, that the timeline doesn't make sense to keep Skubal because you're 3 years away anyway. And you have him under control, it's great. But if you can get 3 significant prospects from the Orioles who have stocked up their minor leagues, this is great. You build organizational depth, you have some talent, and, I don't think it's throwing in the towel. Winning is fun, and it would show a clear sign of, hey, we want to put together a baseball team that can compete day in and day out, not just once every 5th day, which is the case right now. Yeah, they put together a great win streak, and that's, the question to ask, and I'll ask it to you in regards to the buy-in to this season. But I am not, and I think throughout the course of the Detroit Sports Podcast, there's no real players that you and I have just been like, oh my gosh, they're untouchable, where a great deal that's put on the table does not wow us. We're like, okay, do it, because the rebuilds have to be on some level. You have to cap it off by taking established talent and getting individuals that you believe when it's time to win a championship and you start adding free agents that they can have talent. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, and it'll take forever to break it all down, the Tigers just got into a situation in which their organization became, very much, fell behind the 8 ball in regards to talent. You need high-level prospects. You need individuals that have talent. And you found one in Cole Keith. That's been great. Contributed to a win streak, winning 3 consecutive series and having some success as of late. But no, not at all. If you find that, if you go out there and you go find that, hey, Tarik Skubal is somebody that can command, this is great. I think there's a potential Cubs bidding war between the Dodgers, Red Sox, and the Baltimore Orioles. And if you're going to give one of these guys potentially a significant piece that's going to help them win a World Series, my goodness, you have to ask for a lot in advance. But I will say this, because it's true, some fans are right. Do you have any level of PTSD from the fact that the Tigers in the past under Al Avila traded J.D. Martinez for jack shit, traded Justin Verlander for basically nothing, gave away a player in Itzhak Paredes for basically nothing? Are you upset that the Detroit Tigers in the past, under different management, have given away guys, and makes you say, you know what, once you have an established pitcher, why not just keep them? Because the Tigers have not historically, as of late, over the past decade, flipped guys for guys of anything in return. And that's where the gamble is when you trade for prospects.
I don't really have any fear of that. That doesn't make me gun shy. What makes me gun shy is watching Scott Harris try to facilitate a trade last season and completely falling on his face when we tried trading Erod, and Erod vetoed the trade. And this got all the way down to basically the witching hour, and then it was rejected. That's what gives me pause for cause. That's what makes me nervous, is the fact that he was completely embarrassed last year at the trade deadline. He was embarrassed by his own player. So the communication wasn't there. What makes me excited with this discussion, specifically and specifically with the Orioles, you have to look at the Orioles farm system. They've been stockpiling players forever and a day. And the guys whose names are being bantied about are a guy like Jackson Holliday, who plays second base or shortstop. This is a guy who's 20 years old. He's 220 pounds, hits for power. He would come up and he would immediately start for you. It's Kobe Mayo, who's a third baseman, also plays first base. Another guy who's in AAA who would come up. He's 230 pounds. Another guy who hits hard would immediately start for you. So these are 2 bats that are going to start in your lineup, and you're helping take care of the corners of the infield in the middle of the infield as well. And then there's different names kind of being thrown about because it sounds like it'd be a 3-player deal, and it could be a guy like Chase McDermott, who's a right-handed pitcher who's in AAA. It could be other infielders or other outfielders, guys who are ready to take that next step and go up to that next level, which is the major leagues, which has to get you excited because these guys aren't going to sit in your minor league system. These guys are going to come in and immediately start to pay dividends on this roster, and that's why it's exciting. Look, Tarik Skubal has been a guy that you and I have openly praised, a guy that you and I have been incredibly excited to watch grow, and it's awesome to see him be this dominant. But you're looking at this roster, and this is something we talked about weeks ago. There's so many holes on this roster, and their timeline is not necessarily where you want it to be. We're hoping that this would be maybe a year of growth. This would be a year where they would be scratching and clawing to get into the playoffs. They're going to have to come out in the second half. They're going to have to play better than .600 baseball. I don't know if this team is equipped or built to do that. So it's going to be another failed year when you're not making the playoffs. You have to add pieces. You need to add guys. Well, why not add some young guys that are blocked in the organization that they're currently at? You can trade one player. You can get 3 guys who could possibly be all-stars in 2 years. When your team's finally in that window where they're ready to make that run, where they're ready to be a legit threat in the playoffs. And that's what this is all about. It's trying to line things up to where when that window does open, you can actually go full bore and you can make that run at winning that World Series. Because right now, with Tarik Skubal on this roster, they're about 3, maybe 4 years away from being a legit contender. You trade Tarik Skubal. Yeah, it hurts your pitching staff because, like I said, he's arguably the best pitcher in the MLB right now. But you're bringing in 2 talents that are going to immediately start for you and a possible third talent that's going to start for you. In 2 years' time, these guys should have developed a little bit more, and these guys could be making runs to play in an all-star game, and you're adding them to an already potent young roster that should be hitting its stride at the exact same time. And that makes you deadly. That makes you lethal. That's when you go out and you trade for one of those, or you sign one of those high-priced free agents, and you bring them in, and it helps put you over the top. And that's why I'm excited about this possibility of Tarik Skubal being on the block, Tarik Skubal possibly being traded, and what that return could fetch for you. Doesn't make me scared that Scott Harris has been, I don't want to say reckless, but he was definitely careless last season. That doesn't necessarily that's what kind of scares me. The fact that Al Avila and prior general managers have boned these trades. I'm taking each guy kind of on their own merits. I need to see Scott Harris learn from what happened last year and make sure that doesn't ever happen again, because that was embarrassing for the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, it's a situation in which you have to maximize the return. You have to get value. You have to sell to the fan base that, hey, you're giving up somebody that has now become popular, an all-star, somebody that's considered one of the top at his position. It's not easy to find high caliber pitching at that level. It's just not. That's what wins you World Series, and that's what's needed to be able to compete. Unfortunately, the Tigers are not competing for a World Series for another 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. That's just the way it's looking, and it's clear. Scott Harris hit the jackpot. He's like, oh, I don't have to draft college players. I can draft high school players. Ding, 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 ding. I can do this forever. I can take these guys and drop them in the minors all the way in single A and work their way up. So,
since you bring that up, did it surprise you, because they just had their draft this past week, did it surprise you at how heavy they went after high school players? And is that a concern for you? Because when I seen that, I was like, this is so Scott Harris. And I was like, I'm just not a fan. I'd much rather you go get the college arms who are going to be ready a little bit quicker and who are a little bit more mature, and you kind of know what they are and you know what they could be.
This is great for the Scott Harris family and the bank account. He literally sold a big-time rebuild, and he sold long-term vision, doing things the right way, not skipping steps. It's a beautiful thing. Write that down, cuz, so that when we become administrators, that's what we're going to sell. We're going to sell, like, we're not doing football. Football, they need you to win in 2-3 years or you're out. You got to do baseball, hockey, and basketball, where you can sell to an owner who probably has got his head up his ass. You know, it's going to take 7 years, and we got to really strip this thing down. There's a reason why you guys haven't been competitive. We need to kind of take our time and really not skip any steps and do things the right way. And you can get 5-6 years making $3-4 million a year to rebuild a baseball team. And no, I wasn't surprised at all. I said, I kind of liked it. Overall, the consensus has been they got good talent across the board. But yeah, this has been a situation in which, it's testing everyone's patience. This is not, the best way for the fan base to look at it. It's not year 10 of not being in the playoffs. It's year 2 of Scott Harris's rebuild, and there's been some ups and some downs, and there's been some really clear misses like Maeda, but you never know what he's going to do in the bullpen. But I look at it like, okay, in year 2, they're stocking up the talent as much as possible. There's a lot of good names like Clark and Jace Young and that are out there that can be very good pitchers for the Tigers. So I look at it like, hey, there's opportunities for the Detroit Tigers to do some things. Jace Young, the second baseman, Max Clark, I think, is another pitcher that everybody's talking about. So you realize that the Detroit Tigers are kind of building a situation in which you have some good talent. And the pitcher that everyone's talking about now, Jackson Jobe, has the potential for the future. You just signed, and you're starting to see the fruits of Colt Keith. So there's some talent that we can hang our hat on. And so, cuz, I have to ask you, with the series win over the Dodgers, the thrilling comebacks, have they sucked you back in? We definitely checked in throughout the year, and it faded a little bit with that losing streak that got them to 7 games out from the wild card. But that, just like in sports, just when you thought they were out, they suck you back in with some wins. To me, I look at it like it's an average baseball team, and even if they get to the postseason, they're going to get their ass handed to them. It's an 82 to 87 win team. They're average, and Scott Harris told us this is a developmental year. That's how I've kind of now accepted it, and wins are great, but I look at it like, yeah, they're going to have some moments where they struggle because of the youth, but they've kind of tinkered. The old lineup was not good enough. Now you got Colt Keith doing some things, and you're getting some contributions from, Riley Green and others as well. You got Malloy up here now learning on the job. So I look at it like, okay, they've tinkered a little bit. They've sent down those that struggled. They've clearly taken out Maeda from the pitching rotation, and you get a chance to evaluate some guys. And I think that I'm not buying in that this is going to be a fruitful season, but I'm buying in a little bit that there's some development here, and there's some pieces that maybe you can start to plug into next year.
Yeah, to answer the first part of your question, I'm not sucked back in. I will say this: I am paying a little bit more leisurely attention to the Tigers, kind of scoreboard watching, keeping track of what's going on. If the game happens to be on and I've got nothing else going on, or I'm not watching one of the days that we've got a million hours of wrestling to get through, I'll turn it on and I'll watch, and I'll sit back and I'll enjoy. But I am not sucked in. I'm not edge of my seat. And I think I'm in lockstep with you. I watch this team casually, kind of from afar, and what I'm seeing is some development. I'm seeing a team that is starting to maybe put things together. I still think they are years away from where we want them to be, where they're an actual contender for a World Series. But I think this team is starting almost like remember when Dan Campbell took over? We do this a lot. We always end up comparing football to baseball here, and we kind of compare what the Lions did. You remember the season that Dan Campbell had, I think it was his first season, where it was an absolute dumpster fire. And towards the back end of the season, they started putting some wins together. I think they ended up finishing the season with 3 straight wins. Then you rolled into year 2, and it started a little bit rough. And by the end of the year, they had kind of figured some stuff out, and they started to gain a little bit of momentum. I feel like the Tigers in this All-Star break kind of came at the worst time because they were starting to figure some stuff out, and they're starting to build some momentum. So if they can continue some of that momentum and continue to build on those things that they've established and that they've learned, I think this team is on the right track. Again, that track is still years away. It could be expedited with a Tarik Skubal trade and the trade actually working out for both teams. Look, when you trade players, it doesn't have to be one team wins, one team loses. There are trades that work out for both teams. And in this case, this could give Baltimore the starting pitching that they need, and this could give the Tigers the positional players that can hit that they need. And in the end, this could all work out. And, one day these two teams could be facing off for an AL divisional crown. So I think this could work for the Tigers. I've been impressed with what they've done lately, right? The never say die attitude and them not rolling over, especially when they could have packed up and kind of mailed in this half of the season. The fact that they've continued to fight and scratch and claw has been impressive. That being said, they're still like 7 games out of the wild card. And like I said, to start this segment, you got to play better than 600 baseball to even scratch the surface to get into that type of a position to where you're in the where you're in the wild card and making the playoffs. So this team still has a lot of work to do. Again, they've kind of buried themselves early on in this season, and they've dug themselves quite a bit of a hole to try to dig out of. But I do see some building. I see some momentum that this team has kind of put together, and that's impressive. And those are things that you can look at and you can be excited about. But I just think it's too much damage done earlier this season that they're not going to be able to get out of the way of.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be real interesting when Scott Harris now has to be put to the test. Is it Jack Flaherty? Is it both? Is it Tarik Skubal? It's going to be real interesting for Scott Harris. He's got to win. He's got to do this the right way. He has to step up and bring the talent to the Detroit Tigers. So real intriguing stuff, and it's going to be very, very much interesting to pay attention to the reaction of the fans should a trade go down, because there's been a little bit more hope with a couple of nice series win and comeback wins and the development of a potential now batter that you signed and is now living up to expectations. If you agree or disagree with anything that we said about Tarik Skubal, hit us up at Detroit Podcast. It's where you can find us and comment on anything that you hear each and every week. And now we turn our attention to the team with the spotlight clearly on them. Everybody's excited. Rookies report on Saturday, but the media doesn't get out there for the first practice. Our first chance to talk to Dan Campbell will be the 24th of July. And basically, you're going to hear from Dan Campbell almost every single day. 5-6 days a week in training camp, you're going to hear from the head coach. It's an exciting time. It's a Super Bowl team. Right now, we're in the midst of rankings where everybody's like, oh, is Amon-Ra St. Brown a top 10 receiver? Is Jared Goff ranked better than Stafford? It's all interesting, but not really all that relevant. It's just kind of giving a sense of what the NFL world thinks of your players. And I think that the biggest concern for me now, in just reading what everybody's been saying about the Lions roster, I think the biggest concern is not at defensive back. It's at linebacker. It kind of feels like you can really kind of hone in on Jack Campbell, Alex Anzalone, and Derek Barnes and ask the question, hey, are they going to be able to do the job in regards to tackles, in regards to reading and recognizing their keys, taking the step forward? Because amongst the groups there, Ali McNeil was snubbed, but I think the roster is pretty set with talent established. Jack Campbell has question marks. Alex Anzalone is ascending. He's had a good couple years. Derek Barnes, I think rebounded nicely from an epic mistake. I think the linebackers are the biggest question mark because, you can question wide receiver 3. You can question a lot of depth. But every NFL team, if you lose players that are starters, are going to struggle. I mean, it's just really tough. But I do think the Lions have depth along the offensive line. They have guys like Khalif Raymond and Antoine Green, Donovan Peoples-Jones that can step in. But you can't. I mean, no NFL team can withstand multiple big injuries. Like if you have an Amon-Ra St. Brown or a Frank Ragnow, Penei Sewell, the hallmarks of your team, if they get hurt, it's going to be a struggle. You're going to deal with it, but I think that the Lions have enough talent across the board that it's legit to talk about this football team as being Super Bowl contenders. I think it's legit to believe that this football team, I'm curious, one of my first couple of thoughts about the Detroit Lions entering training camp is, what does championship training camp look like? Now that there's Super Bowl expectations, it was talked about last year, but it wasn't like something that people thought was realistic in terms of winning it all. Now it's a football team that is in the spotlight. Everybody says, okay, you were in the NFC Championship game. You got the motivation you need. I think the biggest storyline is, can this football team live up to championship aspirations, have quality practices, get reports of, hey, the offense and defense are crisply executing. Everybody comes in with a serious attitude. The health of the veterans that you brought in that were injured, do they step it up as training camp progresses? So the big two storylines I'm looking at clearly are going to be Jack Campbell. How does he step up? And what does the attitude look like? Are they happy after a down practice? Are they a situation in which they're overly confident? Do they believe in their own hype? Do they, not grind? I doubt that will happen with the coaches they have. But the storylines are going to be key in regards to, hey, can this football team rise to the level of expectations? And these are, and I think clearly, if you watch Receiver in episode 3, I think the greatest episode in Netflix history, I think that if you look at just the attitude of Amon-Ra St. Brown, never satisfied, the way he was raised, if that attitude can permeate across the locker room, that starvation, that hunger to win a Super Bowl for the city in New Orleans, I think the storybook ending can happen this year. It's tough. It's going to be a grind. There's going to be twists and turns, and 17 games, there's always a stretch of football where things look a little wonky. But I think the biggest thing for this football team is, hey, you're championship caliber now. You got to practice like it. You got to walk the walk, talk the talk, and you got to go and execute. And I hope they hit the ground running. It's always slow. Guys, the first couple practices are not padded. So it's just going to be a lot of, hey, here's what these guys are saying. It's all going to be about what they did in the offseason and the Super Bowl hype. So the early parts are still good to pay attention to get an early look at some of the rookies, the quarterback competition, for backup. And you're also going to see who's going to step up to win some jobs that are available. And most notably, I think people are interested in the kicking situation. But to me, the biggest storyline is this team is championship worthy in caliber. Do they live up to it, and how do they conduct themselves? What storylines are you watching? What catches your attention? What do you have on your notebook as to, hey, I can't wait to read about this player or this position battle for the Detroit Lions as training camp is around the corner, because those 6 weeks flew by, man. The fastest 6 weeks in history is when the Doc gets a vacation.
I think for me, it's going to be, who is that other wide receiver going to be? Look, you know what Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to do, right? The guy is a stud. If he keeps up this level of play, the guy is definitely going to be a Hall of Famer. He's an absolute G out there. But who's going to be his Robin? Who's going to be that guy who, if Amon-Ra's got the double coverage, who's going to be the guy that's going to get open? Is it going to be J-Mo? Is it going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones? Is it going to be Khalif Raymond? Who's that guy who's going to step up and solidify that number 2 wide receiver spot? And then who's going to fall in line behind him? You know, we look at this offense and we're like, man, this is a really, really potent offense. Offensive line, you go up and down. These guys are ranked in the tops by a lot of league execs and a lot of front offices. You look at the backfield. Backfield gets a lot of kudos. What they did last year, we're all expecting Jahmyr Gibbs to take a monster step forward, and I think he will. And then you look at what's going on the outside with the wide receivers and the guys who are going to catch the ball. You know Sam Laporta is going to be a beast. You know Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be a beast. But after those 2 guys, there's a couple question marks. So for me, it's going to be who early on is trying to seize that position and trying to take that position over as the number 2 guy, and then who falls in line as the number 3 guy. And then on the other side of the ball, who's going to be that opposite pass rusher to Aiden Hutchinson? This is something that I harp on all the time, because I just believe if you're going to win at this level, you need to get pressure on the quarterback. And the way you do that is with the guys up front. I think the linebacking core is going to be fine. I think the revamped secondary, I think there's going to be some growing pains, but I think by the end of the year, it's all going to pan out, and it should be really, really good. But it's going to be the guys up front who are going to allow those guys, that back 7 group, that time to kind of mature and kind of feel out their way and kind of fill their roles a little bit. So who's going to be the guy opposite of Aiden who's going to take advantage of Aiden's double team? Who's going to help push that rush or push that pocket towards Aiden? Or if Aiden's doing that, who's going to take advantage of that? So I want to see those two things answered. And look, by the time we get around to opening day for the Lions when they're taking on the Rams, these things should kind of start to flesh themselves out a little bit. Earlier today, I heard an interview with Dan Campbell. He did an interview, I believe it was down in Texas, with one of the guys that he knows, one of his buddies. And he had a good point. You don't really know what you have until it's probably week 3, week 4, sometimes week 5 of the season. At that point, you really know what kind of team you got. So I think going into the season, we'll have a bit of an idea, but we're really not going to know until we get through that first quarter of the season where we can really sit there and pin guys down and be like, this is what they're doing. This is what they need to do better. This is, this is Aiden's Robin, and this is, Amon-Ra St. Brown's Robin. But I do want to see those strides taken in training camp, and those are the big stories that I'm looking forward to. And look, along with those strides and along with those storylines that we just mentioned, that kind of leads into, is there a possibility for Detroit to stumble? Like, if they don't figure out who that second and third wide receiver is, if that linebacking core, in your estimation, doesn't take those steps forward and doesn't continue to build on what's been honestly a pleasure to watch. Like, Alex Anzalone has been really, really good the last 2 seasons. Jack Campbell last year had a really good progression. Derek Barnes making big plays in big games. Those things were nice to see. If those guys stumble this year, does this team stumble in the North, and do they take a step back? I want to get your estimation. What are the chances that happens to the Lions, that they don't win the North, that they don't have a repeat of what they did last season, where it really felt like they dominated just about everybody they played? And look, a lot of the good feelings ran out in the final 30 minutes of the season, but this team was in damn near every single football game, and this team dominated the NFC North. Do they trip up over their own feet this year, or do you see a little bit of some control C, control V, just kind of cut and paste?
Yeah, it's crazy because the hype is real. You're getting national pundits talking about the Lions being Super Bowl contenders, bold predictions everywhere, Lions winning the Super Bowl. A lot of great odds if you're into betting for the Detroit Lions to have a lot of MVP candidates, a lot of good seasons. So it's great. Look, I could see a scenario in which they don't win the NFC and still get into the postseason, 10-11 wins, and the Packers get 12 or just one game better than them. I think the Packers have a real good opportunity to compete strong for the NFC, and that's where it's going to be. And they clearly had great momentum in destroying Dallas, and then they were disappointed in their loss to the 49ers. So you look at a football team like the Packers, they're going to compete hard. The Lions are going to be right there, but I just truly believe the Lions have a lot of talent across the board. And the one thing that would, I think, preclude the Lions is if that defense doesn't take the step forward. The biggest storyline is, can the defense gel? The offense cut is going to be legit. It's going to be box office. There's no way they put together that offense with St. Brown, J-Mo, Gibbs, Montgomery, Sam Laporta, lots of weapons, solid, respectable offensive line, worth the price of admission, worth the $120, worth the 60% price increase. Sorry, fans, they got you. They jacked up the price on you, but it's worth it. You're going to see a lot of points. They're going to move the football. Goff has this is the season. This is the year where he puts it all together. He's confident. He got married, so he clearly is going to be well-rested, well-vacationed. Very much happy, I would presume, after vacationing. All the freak dancing these guys were doing at Panay Sewell wedding. This was wedding season for the Lions. Jared got married. Panay got married. You're looking at all these opportunities that this football team has to have a lot of fun and a lot of success. It's great, and I think that the confidence is going to be sky high. The question mark is going to be, does the defense gel? Like you said, who's opposite of Aiden? Is it going to be Davenport? How does Mekhi Wingo acclimate? James Houston, how does he rebound after an injury-plagued season? So, the secondary, obviously there's question marks, but there's a lot of talent. Terrion Arnold's doing the work. If you check out his offseason videos, the man is grinding. He wants to be Hall of Fame. Like, he is the Amon-Ra St. Brown of the defense. Clearly, he's doing all the work and extra. So I'm very impressed, and I think that the talent's there. I have the feeling, and I've said it on other podcasts and appearances, I think I'm watching, and you're going to be watching. I think we're going to watch a Super Bowl caliber team, but obviously I can't sit here and declare that they're going to win it. I'm fatalistic. I'm skeptical. So you know what I'm predicting? I'm predicting right here, right now, Lions and Baltimore in the Super Bowl with Lions losing. Heartbreak. Lead. I mean, we are Detroit fans. We're used to this, and I can be proven wrong. It doesn't make a difference. It's just a July prediction. The Lions lead at halftime of the Super Bowl, only to fall yet again, epically destroying the fan base. Lamar Jackson just starts throwing the ball deep all over the place and haunts the Detroit Lions. Muff punt. Or Jake Bates doesn't miss a single field goal all year long. Lions up by 13, and he's got a 42-yarder right in the middle, and the ball just hooks and shanked or hits the upright and doesn't. Something will happen, and it'll set off the course of justice where the Lions will fall short. And that's just, putting it out there so that I can prepare for it, and then after 100 hours of work having to cover a losing Super Bowl team, that's the pain that we're going to get inflicted by is, come on, the storybook, get to the Super Bowl and win it. I always said that I would be stuck in awe for a minute, in shock, if ever the Detroit Lions were to win the Super Bowl. I would be shocked. It would be a dream scenario. It would be great. It would be a dream come true for all sports fans, for everybody that's listened to us over 11 years, to you who's been a fan since childhood, to every one of our family members who've suffered. So I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that, it's just me blowing hot smoke into this microphone. But I feel good. The football team is going to be successful. People are going to pay attention, and it's great to be talking about. We're going to be talking about X's and O's on a deep level here on the podcast, choices that Dan Campbell made. What'd you make of what he said? Do you? I think he gave the great answer when he was asked about being aggressive. He said, "Well, I have adapted before. I can adapt. You guys are like, I just do what I think is best." And analytics say I go by feel. I think he's going to be aggressive, but not as aggressive. Just not as. I don't think he's going to. Go for it on his side of the football when he's pissed off in certain situations. I think that he'll calculate when he needs to be aggressive, and with a reliable kicker, he'll tone it down. And I hope that the kicker that ends up winning it is somebody that, because the Lions for some reason have been odd in terms of their kicking choices. I think they're going to handle business in regards to making the choices needed to win games on both sides of the ball, offense and defense.
Yeah, I think if you look at Dan Campbell's growth from season 1 to where we're at now, he has learned, he has adjusted every single year. He's been aggressive, but I think as the seasons have wore on, it's been aggression with caution. It's not like he's just doing stuff willy-nilly. I think early on in his first season, he would do things, and I think it was to kind of gauge the tenor of the team, to put them in spots where it's like, look, you guys got to bow up. We're going to go for this. We're going to do this. And I think that was a little bit to his detriment just because he believed so much in his team. And at the time, they just didn't have the talent that they have now. I think now with this extra talent, with the team that has shown that they can do these things, I think he'll be maybe a little bit more cautious, but I think he's still going to be aggressive. I really do believe the key is going to be having a kicker that he trusts, having a kicker that he can rely on. I don't think you see Dan Campbell go for it on 4th and 6 when, from the opponent's 40-yard line, if you've got a kicker that he knows can kick a 50-yard field goal or 55-yard field goal. If he feels comfortable and confident in that kicker being able to do that, I think he's going to take those 3 points. He's not stupid. He's going to take the points. So it's one of those things where I think if he has a roster and those positions on that roster are filled out by guys that he trusts, that's who he's going to put the ball in their hand or on their foot. And I think that's what you've seen over time. He trusts Jared Goff. He trusts Amon-Ra St. Brown. He trusts Jahmyr Gibbs. He trusts David Montgomery. He trusts Sam Laporta. These are his guys. He trusts that offensive line. So he wants, if it comes down to winning a game, he wants the ball in their hand. He didn't trust Michael Badgley. He didn't trust Riley Patterson. He didn't trust any of the kickers that this team has had trouble trying to nail down. To me, it feels like they've had a ton of issues trying to get a kicker since Jason Hansen. Matt Prater was good, but Matt Prater had his own foibles when he was here. So it's been kind of trying to insert that square peg into that round hole, and they just haven't done it right. They haven't figured it out yet. So maybe it's Bates. Maybe Bates is the guy. Maybe Jake Bates comes in, the UFL or USFL superstar, the guy who can kick a 64-yard field goal. Maybe he comes in, and maybe that's what Dan Campbell needs to see, is a guy who's going to be able to go out there and do that. The hope is he does that a little bit more consistently than what he did in the USFL. I think when he was kicking from distance, he was right around a 60%, but anything like 50 yards and in, he was actually really, really good. And I think that's what Dan Campbell's looking for, is I'll get you close. I just need you to be able to do it when I get you close. So hopefully Bates is the guy, and we can kind of roll off into the sunset and everything will be okay. But, I think with Dan Campbell, it is a lot of thought through, and it's a lot of processed aggression. It's one of those things where if we roll out this play right here, what are the chances are that it's going to succeed? And I think if it's usually better than a 55% chance, which those odds sound low, he's going to go for it. You know what I'm saying? I think that's what we've seen, and I think this team will continue to be aggressive. They might just not be as aggressive. Instead of going for it on 4th down 6 times in a game, they might only go for it, 4 times in a game. Still being aggressive, just not as much.
Yeah, before we get to our final topic, some praise to a Detroit Lions legend. This year, because Amon-Ra St. Brown will do a podcast, Aiden Hutchinson will do a podcast. A lot of the Lions are a lot more open. If there was one member of the Lions that you'd want to start a podcast that you think would be interesting or entertaining, would it be J-Mo? Would it be Panay? Would it be Jared Goff because of the guests that he would get? I think Goff would be very interesting and intriguing because he'd get high-level guests and he'd be a sophisticated interviewer. But J-Mo, I think, would wild out and go and branch out beyond, kind of similar to the pivot, beyond sports. Maybe like Shannon Sharp. I think he'd go out there and get, influencers. He'd get hot to a girl. He'd go out there and have some fun interviews in a couple years. Maybe not this year, but J-Mo, I think, would be entertaining. Jahmyr Gibbs, probably not a good candidate for public speaking because of his reservedness in terms of media accessibility. I think Panay Sewell might need to kind of get behind that microphone to the Panay Sewell show, but I'm curious, Hutchinson, a lot of the Lions are going to talk this year on podcasts. Hutchinson's podcast probably will be intriguing, probably a lot of Michigan-based, a lot of family-based stuff, a lot of motivational type stuff in there as well. But I think St. Brown, class of the podcast, his episode this week with his dad was great. The dad holds no punches. He was like, I didn't like these video games. I just tore it up, and I videotaped it too to give these kids some pain. And you're just like, wow, but he's likable. So check it out as well. Which one Lion do you think would have a great podcast if they started one?
I really do think it's two of them. I'm going to go Tyrion Arnold or Rakestraw.
Yes.
And honestly, I think Rakestraw might be a little bit more interesting, might be a little bit more intriguing. He might say some more off the cuff type things that really make you kind of sit back and you're like, oh, okay, I got to tune in next week. Let's hear what he's going to say. But I'm going to go with the new cornerbacks. That'd be cool if they could get together and host one together. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. Defensive backs doing their thing. And Tyrion Arnold definitely understands the game. His social media game is on point, definitely handling his business. And look at the St. Brown brothers. They started.
Look, they could call it DBs being DBs.
Oh man, it's so great.
Just unfiltered,
just doing their thing. And it's so great. The St. Brown brothers now, they have their podcast has a site, and they're covering sports now, similar to everybody else, posting clips and getting in the mix there on social media. So it's real interesting. Now, to put a bow on it, some positivity. Calvin Johnson had his annual golf outing at the Detroit Golf Club, had everybody there. Kay Adams came in from California to host her show from the DGC. And
were you there for this?
No, I did not. I would not have probably gone because it's the last week of vacation. It's great. But other than that, Calvin's, like, we've written a lot of stories on Calvin Johnson.
Yeah,
there's
sure.
a lot. He
I was more interested in Kay Adams.
Yes.
I think she's smoking hot.
Yes. And so just before he spoke with Kay Adams, he appeared at 11 a.m. He was told that he's going to be the newest member of the Pride of the Lions. And it's just great because I think clearly, and I was there for it, when Sheila Hemp was booed out of the arena heavily, it was a lot of mixture of angst because the organization was sucking and a verbal message that, hey, fix the repair the relationship that's been strained with Calvin Johnson. You ask the man for money back, which is the biggest ultimate no-no in the NFL, ultimate sign of cheapness. So credit to Mike Disner, who's done diligent work to repair that relationship. And now Calvin's back in the mix. He's got a partnership with the team, all the accolades. He's around the team, talking to the team, always around the facility, back in good graces. And I think they did the work to show, hey, okay, a legend who did a lot of things, who risked his body for the sport, we did wrong by, but we can now honor. And I thought it was a beautiful moment, touching. He was reduced to tears because it makes it worthwhile to sacrifice your body and to do things for an organization when they show appreciation. And I think that it'll be a fun Monday Night Football game against Seattle. The fan base is going to go crazy. You're going to get a chance to honor Calvin Johnson. And I think seeing maybe Nate Burleson back in town or a lot of the guys that he played with will be special and creating a memorable moment for a guy that deserves it. And Calvin Johnson, look, from learning about him, very much a student of the game, understands everything that needs to go down and speaks very well and highly of the Lions. He just was always saying, hey, they just did me wrong and I can't be part of something out of principle. If they do you wrong, it's the ultimate disrespect. I can't feel anything but wild because they asked for money back. They took money out of my pocket. And, he did say it year after year after year. And then I think if the fans did not boo the shit out of the owner, I think that might not have ended up happening. I think that was the onus to say, oh, okay, we gotta build the culture the right way. We gotta treat the old players the right way, and the fans now can appreciate everything associated with Calvin Johnson. He's the newest member and will be inducted into the Pride of the Lions in a special ceremony on Monday Night Football in the early part of the season against Seattle. I think it's great, a great sign. I think that the Detroit Lions have really steadily worked their way to get into the good graces of the fan base and the community regarding everything they've done since Sheila Hemp has been named the principal owner.
Yeah, and look, I think this is a very defining and pivotal and poignant moment for this franchise. If I was to tell you, we'll go back, I don't know, 2 years ago, we go back 5 years ago, we go back 10 years ago, we go back to the day we started this podcast. If I was to tell you in 2024, your Detroit Lions would be ever so close to winning a championship and be the talk of the town and be the team that we point to basically lift us up and bring us hope and bring us joy for a team winning a championship. And I was to tell you that Sheila Hamp is the best owner in the city of Detroit, you'd have told me I'm smoking crack and you never would have started doing this podcast with me. You'd been like, I can't do this with this guy. He's crazy. But if you look at what Sheila Hamp has done, one, just kind of taking this team and transforming it, revamping it, getting the right people in charge and letting them do their jobs, not meddling with them like a guy like Tom Gores does. Just putting them in their positions and saying, you guys fix this. Going out and bringing in Chris Spielman and saying, Chris, you're a guy that the city loves. You're a guy that everybody identifies with. What do we need to do? And Chris Spielman having a little bit of say, her giving him a voice in what goes on. And then turning around and one of the greatest players to ever play the game, one of the best wide receivers of all time, one of the guys who is an identifiable with your franchise in Calvin Johnson, where you look at that relationship and it was completely strained and Calvin felt wronged by the Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia era. Just completely upset. Like you said, sacrificed his body. Dude's fingertips don't go straight anymore because of what he had to play through. And the fact that he gave everything he had and this team never won anything. Guy felt hurt. Guy felt wrong. Then they come back and they ask for money back from him because he's like, my body won't allow me to do this anymore. I hurt too damn much. They're like, well, that's cool. Give us some of this money back. He was pissed. Sheila Hamp has stepped in, and it's been underneath her guys, underneath her tutelage. It's been with her at the helm. So she gets a ton of the credit for this. She's been able to repair and mend these relationships. You see Barry Sanders is much more active with this organization. That's part of Sheila Hamp. That's part of her touch. That's her mending that relationship because Barry wasn't very happy either. You look at what this team has meant to this city, and you look at what this team has, I mean, shit, not even the city. Look at what this team has meant to this podcast. And look at what this team has meant for your family specifically. You know, it's been a lot. There's been a lot of good that has been done with this team. And a lot of it has been done underneath Sheila Hamp's watch. So I think Calvin Johnson getting inducted into the Pride of the Lions, it's a big deal. It's a big step. But I think what it points to is it points to an owner who came in and understood, look, stuff is messed up here. Things aren't right. This team isn't any good. This organization has stunk from the head down. I need to be the one that changes this. I need to be the one that fixes this. How do I do that? Her first move was going out talking to Chris Spielman and then her devising a plan and then letting the people orchestrate that plan to the best of their ability. And in the meantime, she was working on the back end to smooth over issues with guys like Calvin Johnson, help repair relationships with guys like Barry Sanders. Those two names, those are greats in the game. Those guys right there are the best running back of all time and the best wide receiver of all time. And I don't care how you cut it. Those two dudes are absolute studs in this game. And they were very upset with this organization. They were upset with the Ford family. And Sheila Hamp came in and she was like, let's fix this. I want this to be better. And it was her ability to recognize that there was an issue, look at that issue, and then be able to be humble enough to come to the table and say, look, I understand you guys are upset. I understand you guys are wrong. I get where you're coming from. Let's make this better. How do I fix this? And she was able to fix it. And I think this is a huge step for this team, for this organization. and I think it's a big deal.
Very big deal. And Calvin's revered, created a lot of great memories, played hurt, and I think that just a really popular individual doing his thing post-retirement and also doing his thing in the community with his annual outing. It does great things. And look, you see a lot of the Detroit Lions. They have been stellar in the community. They do great stuff. And he brought in Randy Moss. You bring in people that are close, that he knows, and having people talk about, community efforts and things like that. Just all-around good person, decent human. And he's always a big fan of Jim Rome, always on there, talks to many media outlets and does his thing. So, look, you honor the person and you write the chapter of that era. And it wasn't the best era, obviously, of Lions football, but there were some bright spots with Stafford and Calvin Johnson, their connection and the memories that they created and the work that they tried to do in order to help the football team win. They just weren't surrounded with a lot of talent, that much more around them. And, hey, you look at it and you say Detroit fans support those that give their best effort, play hurt, and are willing to sacrifice something in order to try and win at the highest level. So good for Calvin Johnson. It's going to be a great time. And like we said, the opportunity now for this Detroit Lions football team to really get after it and do some things is going to be spectacular. It's going to be really a special season and one in which I think will help cleanse the palate of all the rebuilds with the other three franchises and really get people excited because there's going to be a lot of wins. More double-digit wins, a lot of great quotes upcoming, a lot of great stories to be told. And we'll see what ends up happening throughout the course of training camp. Make sure you stay tuned to the newly minted Detroit Lions on SI website, rebranded, as now every single team site has a universal name that everything can be kind of under one umbrella so that people can find us more readily and more easily. So check it out, Detroit Lions on SI, si.com/NFL/Lions. And each and every week, here on Doc and Jock, Detroit Sports Podcast at Detroit Podcast, where Adam and I verbally debate, talk about the key relevant sports topics. Make sure you also follow Adam on Twitter as well, at AdamRSTROZ. Hit us up. Let us know if you agree or disagree. Do you have panic about the Lions season? Are you confident? Are you a little bit worried? What has you concerned regarding the 2024 Detroit Lions? We'll answer it. We are the most interactive Detroit sports Twitter page and social media account, I believe, in town. Thank you, cuz. I can't wait to fire it up next week as we preview further Detroit Lions training camp and all the things happening in the world of Detroit sports as the Tigers get back on the grind, as maybe trade rumors heat up. Stay tuned. Stay tuned to the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.